talk about this one little process. This should be fairly quick and fairly easy. Is as many of you know who are working with SQL, that keeping the database on the SQL database in the back end and the DataFlex definition of that synchronized, correct, proper, we provide various tools to do that. And you will have, actually I think Steve's the one who's shown most of those things where it's like, let's go up and we'll convert this data, and let's come up and we'll connect this data, and then we'll connect the data, but we're doing this custom connection in order to keep, to keep the previous values and stuff like that. And if the response you were getting to this was, well, this is really cool, this seems to be really smooth, but I'm not quite sure what all this stuff means. I mean, how did I know I was supposed to select A, and then I was supposed to select B, and then select C? The purpose of this talk is to sort of step back, slow down, and explain exactly what's going on. The other part about this is, as we go through this, if you've been using, our connectivity drivers, there was an old convert wizard, there was a previous connect wizard, there was a previous convert wizard that looked very similar, behaved very similar, but had pretty different, ended up with pretty different behaviors. And if you get nothing more out of this talk than what I'm going to just say right now, in fact, if it's just too early to be in a presentation, I'll finish this next sentence and then you can go rest for half an hour until Harm comes back, is that with the previous versions, connection and conversion wizards, it was really, if something went wrong, and not that anything ever goes wrong, because we are so good at this stuff that a group of, software engineers can't reliably make a screen stay visible, and when it happens, you have to stomp the floor. And if you really wanted to challenge us, I'd say, could we bring those lights down a little bit and bring those lights up? And that'll be your class assignment. And I'll talk to you in a half an hour. But anyway, when things did go wrong, in general, when you tried to connect it, things went wronger. And now what happens is when we've sort of like cleaned it up, so when things go wrong, and hopefully that'll happen less often, when you try to do things, they'll go righter. Thanks for the talk. Okay, when you're working with DataFlex and you're going to be doing one of three things. When you're like working with the data, side data, DataFlex definition and the SQL Server definition, you're either going to be converting data from one form to the other. And for the sake of this talk, and probably for the sake of what most of you people will be doing, you're converting from your embedded database to SQL. And once you're in SQL, you're probably not going to switch to something else. And you're probably not even going to switch that much to other SQL databases, like other SQL types of, you're not going to, you go from DB2 to SQL Server or something like that, you probably don't want us to be doing that conversion for you. But so there's convert, then there's connecting, which Steve showed you, which was you now want to connect to an existing database that's out there. There's an existing database that somebody provided, and you want to be able to use it in DataFlex. How do you connect for that? And then there was the third issue, and this is the one that was always a little, you had to be careful about, is keeping those two definitions in synchronization. So now you're synchronized, everything is working great, and then somebody goes into the back-end tool, and they add 3 columns to a table. What do you do? And generally, you kind of go, oh, why'd you do that? Or they add an index. What do you do? These kinds of things where something happens in the back end, and then what does it take to synchronize it? How do you do that? And so what we'll be talking about today is how you do all of that. But what we're going to be talking about, and we're going to step through this in order, is that the first thing will be convert. And convert means converting from, we're thinking embedded database to, the example here will be SQL Server. Connect which means connecting to an existing SQL database where you have not previously connected to, you have no table definitions in DataFlex for that. Refresh, which is, maybe something has changed, let's synchronize those things to get it to work. And then repair, which means something's not right. I can't open the table in DataFlex anymore. There seems to be an even bigger impedance mismatch. What do I do for that? And that's repair. Okay, convert. You use the SQL Conversion Wizard, and it is now in the Studio's database menu. If you had a 19.0 copy in the Studio, you would just go to the database menu. There'd be an option called SQL Conversion Wizard. It'll pop up a wizard, and what it will do is it will take all the tables that are all the embedded tables, or all the source tables that are in your file list, and it will copy them to a SQL database. And you watched Steve do that yesterday. It copies the table definitions, it copies the data, and then it creates the intermediate file that describes how DataFlex should understand those. So it creates the int file. And also, as you saw, it just uses managed connections. So you don't, the whole connection part, once you've created your connection, it just works. The convert itself, when it does the conversion, it maintains all the same table numbers. So when you start and when you finish, you've got the same tables, the same table names, the same column names, and also the same order of columns, order of indexes. That's automatic. When you make the change, and again, Mr. Mealy showed you this, you can say, do you want it to find good candidates for a primary key? And whenever possible, answer yes. That'll make it happier in the SQL world. Use standard tables. That means, do you want to keep using the Rectum table? And Steve recommended, if possible, don't use Rectum anymore. How do you know if you can do that or not? Is the magic question. And one way to find that out is you could try it. But in general, because, but the other way is just go through your application and just see if you have the word Rectum in your application anywhere. And if you have a find by Rectum, if you have an index 0, you can actually get a rough idea of whether or not you are relying on Rectum in your application. The reason you can often get away with that, for example, our order entry system that just converts, it wasn't like we did anything special to make that happen. It's just that for years, like probably since at least 2000, maybe the 1990s, it has been sort of the common knowledge among DataFlex developers to not rely on Rectum to do things, because it can change if you have to rebuild your, well, all the reasons, we don't want to talk about that. But so if you can, do you want your data in OEM or ANSI? We'd probably suggest ANSI. It doesn't matter a whole lot, except if you use ANSI, then you'll have more external tools that you don't have to deal with it. And there's also like just do the conversion only. Just give me the definition, don't actually copy the data. So the only other consideration is, are you using overlap fields? And it will copy. If you're using this old thing called underlaps, you really need to go through your code and see how you can clean that up. Even with overlaps, they're no longer necessary. So you might want to make a note to yourself, is there a way I could change my code so I don't need to use overlaps anymore? And when something goes wrong, you don't reconvert. It's not going to be a happy experience. You say, it didn't work. You can try again, but odds are you're going to get some kind of an error. And one of the most common errors is if the SQL table already exists on the back end, and you say, I want to convert it, and I want to use that same table name, it's not going to be able to do it, and so you're going to get an error. And so what's the solution to that? You go into your back-end tool. Well, first of all, you make sure that you're in the right place, you're doing the right thing, and you really didn't want that previous table, and then get rid of it. So, and then the other thing is, if you have problems, then don't go into the connection wizard and try to do a connect. because that's just going to confuse it even further. But you can maybe try doing a repair. So anyway, now we've converted our data. What about connect? Okay, a connect, as I mentioned, is used to connect to an existing database. The example we were showing was let's say you had the Chinook database on your server, and you say, I want to connect to it in DataFlex. The way you do that is you run the Connect Wizard, which is also, you'll find it on the Studio menu, and there's something called the SQL Connect Wizard. You select it, and then when you get into that wizard, just to show you what we're talking about here, the Conversion Wizard, you select right here. And I'm not going to go through it because we've seen it several times, but I just thought I'd at least show you where it is. The Connect Wizard, and you'll notice the database menu has been completely reordered. The first thing you do is you set up connection managers. Then you're either going to want to connect or convert. So we talked about convert. When you go into connect, you're going to get this. Is always required that you don't read this. Do I want a wizard? Where am I? Oh. I've already passed my first hurdle for the morning, which is like, oh wait, I don't have a managed connection. What's wrong? Reboot. Wrong workspace. You get to this thing where you're going to have the option saying, I want to connect new, repair existing, custom, and you see there's no refresh here, but I'll make sense out of that in a second. But anyway, those are the options where I say you'll want to go to the connect new, and what will happen is it will look at this SQL table, and it will create a DataFlex definition of it. And it will assign the tables to file list in the order that it decides to do it, because it has no idea what order to do it in. It creates the data types, it creates your indexes. Steve will be talking about this a little bit later. Like if the index is unique, it'll make it a unique index. If the index on the back end is non-unique, it will make it unique by making it a client-side index, but that's all for that. And it'll assign relationships, so it'll just do what it needs to do. The thing that's very important to keep in mind with everything else I'll be talking about, connect, repair, and then the custom changes, is this makes no changes to the actual database table. Like no SQL tables were damaged in the creation of this presentation. It's only changing the int files and your FD files that you use to compile it. And the reason this is important to keep in mind is it means you don't have to have the rights to be able to go in and change the tables. And the other reason it's important, it means if you just back up your int files before you do this, before you start trying to do any of these things, it doesn't matter how much damage you do, you can always put the old int files back and you'll be right back where you started. So just worth keeping in mind. By definition, it ignores any int file information because it doesn't exist yet. It's not, if it's not in the file list and there's no int file. And if you're already connected, you want to do something else, which is refresh. So at this point, we have a good database, and we've either done it through a conversion or we've done it through a connection, but you're just not sure that it's up to date. We're making the assumption that in the SQL world, if either you're controlling it, so you know if you've made a change in the back end, or if you have a DBA that's controlling it, and they've made changes in the back end, that this is a large enough site that the DBA, and yes, you're going to raise your hand and say they don't do this, but the DBA will have carefully decided to make that change and notified everybody about that change. Because it doesn't just affect you as your DataFlex application. Anyone in the SQL world, it's like, by the way, there's a new table, there's a new column in this table, it does this. Everyone wants to know about that. So it's like, okay, it's been changed, or I think there's a change. I just need to synchronize my table. I want to make sure that my definition is up to date with the other definition. And this was always, this was the thing that was difficult to do, is how do you do that? And it used to be, well, you could you could do a connect again. You could, just say connect everything, but then you lose all the customizations, the metadata, the data about the table that DataFlex needed that was custom to DataFlex. What's this relationships? What's the special length? What's something special about it? As soon as you did connect, you lost it all again. So what you really wanted was this process that said, look, I've got a SQL table that has a certain definition, and I've got my DataFlex definition of it, which is in the which sort of like is the exception information in the InvT file. I want you to look at these two and merge them to the best of your capability. And that's what refresh does. And so all it does is it just looks at it and it retains the order of your indexes. It just takes the two pieces of information and it connects them. Once again, it only changes the InvT files, so it's safe. Do a little bit of backup and you can play with it all day. It's useful to, the kind of backend changes it'll catch are like new indexes, change column lengths, things like that. And because it doesn't want to confuse you with tables out in the database that you've not even connected to yet, it just skips them. The limitation for that is if the table cannot be opened using the standard DataFlex open logic, it can't repair it. If for some reason the connection has changed so much or your InvT file has changed so much that if you do like an open table and you get an error, repair won't be able to fix it. But before we talk about the limitations, let's just see what we're talking about is our refresh. If I've been saying repair, I meant to be saying refresh so far. And what I did want to show you is how do you do a refresh just to make sure it's right. You just point to the table and you say refresh it. And it just does it. And if you look at the output window, it'll say customer 25 is refreshed. It just did that whole process I talked about. And so this is a fairly lightweight thing to do. It's like, I'm not sure everything's up to date, just do a refresh. Well, what if you're not sure about a bunch of tables? Then you just go down here and you just say refresh table. You select the ones you want to refresh. So this is just done in the studio, and it is very, very purposefully non-interactive. Just try it, make sure it's up to date. And this, it's difficult for this to do bad things because it doesn't change the back end. And what it will do is it'll just like suddenly you'll bring up Table Explorer again, and you say, oh, I've got a new index. Or, oh, I've got, there's a new column name here, and I can use that, I can compile with it, I can work with it. So refresh is just really simple. You just go there and you do that. As I said, the only limitation of it is if you can't open the table, it can't do the refresh. And what would be an example of can't open the table? It's too early. I'm not going to experiment with it and break it and then show you that it doesn't work because it'll either work or it won't. But it's generally when you go here. No, I will. What the heck? The worst it can do is not work, and then I'll blame it on the projector. What a refresh does is it looks at the table on the back end, it looks at the existing InvT file, and it says, do they yield the same results? And if not, what's the difference? And then it merges it so that it's up to date. So, for example, if there's a new table, if there's a new column at the back end that you don't know about yet, that column will suddenly appear. So you could do something like change this to InvT, give it an invalid database, and then say refresh, and you're going to get this error message. And all it's basically it's saying, look, I can't even go out. Oh, I can't find the table. I can't even work with it. And notice what it says at the bottom. You can attempt a repair by running the SQL Connect Repair Wizard located in the database menu. So what is repair? Well, what repair is it's the next level up, is when refresh doesn't do because you can't open the table, you try to go in the back way, which is you go back into the Connect Wizard, the Connect Repair Wizard, and you say repair, and then you can select, you open the table directly, and then you do the connection. So if that didn't make sense, that's fine. The important thing to understand is when repair doesn't work, just go into the Connect Repair Wizard, and you say repair existing. And you notice it's only going to allow me to repair ones that are connected. Oh, thank you. Crowd, there's CodeSense that helps you run things, and thank you once again. CrowdSense did what it's supposed to do. Let that be a lesson. I did that to the inventory file, right? Which is, right, where is it? There we go. So, oh, I messed this one up so much that what I'm going to do is I'm going to repair something that doesn't need repairing, like order these items. Basically, what I messed this one up so much that I'd have to go into custom. So that'll dig into this. But then maybe it's a good, basically, but the idea with repair is that you actually go in, you select your connection, you go in, and it works just like refresh, but it works on more tables. But as I just proved, it doesn't work on all tables, because sometimes things can be so far off, and in this case, it's trying to find a database that doesn't exist, and it can't do it, but it thinks it's already connected. When all else fails, then you go to this, actually we've skipped repair, but I talked about it. And the limitations is some changes can be severe enough when repair won't do, you use custom. And what custom is it's sort of like, think of that as just super repair. So with refresh, well, not so much, with connect, refresh, repair, what it does is the items that it lets you change when you run these wizards are the items that it thinks it should let you change. And that's really important, because what it's going to do is not like make a second connection to the same table and put it somewhere else, or it's not going to take a table that has information and try to convert data on top of it or whatever. It guides you through it, so it just works, and if something isn't quite right, it should it should stop you. But now you're saying, okay, but even that didn't work, and so what do we do to? Yeah. That one? Okay. You finally go into custom. And what does custom do? Well, custom says I'm going to take my chances. When you get into custom, it's going to say, okay, if the table's already connected, what do you want to do? And you can skip it, which means I can't try to do anything to it. Or if the InvT file exists, use it to synchronize the definition as best it can, which what I'm hoping is when we now go into the InvT file that I screwed up so much that this will work. If not, I will go back and figure out why. But and then this third option is no. Okay, and this is what you do when sort of like this, the next level of getting it to work is okay, these things aren't quite right, but I still want to use the int file. I don't want to do a connect again, because if you use a connect again, it's going to like just, I'm going to lose all my int file. If even that doesn't work, at the final level is this last option that says ignore the int file, which means I'm starting over, I'm doing a connection again, but please use the same file number I've been using. And that's really important, because what happens is when you've done your full custom repair, at least everything is where you expect it to be. So let's see what happens if, oh, thank you. Glad someone's paying attention up here. At this point, I will go to my InvT file. And even though it was coming from a different database now, which doesn't exist, which is why it wouldn't let me do it before, with any luck, we have the connections there and the tables there. And so maybe that's a fairly good example, is that I will guarantee you if I had tried to do this a year ago and made that same mistake, I would have needed 3 hours up here to get it all working. And which meant sitting by myself, it would have taken me an hour and a half. But anyone who's ever given a presentation, when you try to do something and it doesn't work up here, it's hopeless. It's like the more you do, the worse you get. And this and now what happens is it stopped me, and I go, wait a minute, why can't I do that? Well, don't worry why I can't do it. It had a good reason to do that. Maybe try the next level, saying be more careful, take care of it. But the general idea is that this is how you use things to get synchronized, and then when, as a presenter, you do something really stupid and you mess things up and the file's just a mess, you can still go in and use the tool, and it doesn't make it worse. It usually makes it better, and worst cases, it sort of leaves where you are. And so that's what Connect Repair does. It's actually 2 different wizards, and it should make it a lot easier once you're up and running to keep up and running. Thank you.